You're not just busy, you're addicted to it. You wake up, and your mind is already moving, thinking, planning, listing what needs to be done, what you forgot, what's coming next. There is no pause, no stillness, no space, just movement. From the moment you open your eyes, you reach for your phone, you check something, messages, notifications, updates, anything, just to start the motion. Because silence feels uncomfortable, stillness feels unfamiliar. So you fill it immediately, without thinking. And the day continues like that. One task to another, one distraction to another, one obligation to another. Always doing something, always moving, always occupied. Even when you don't need to be, you create something to do. You find something. You fill the space. Because empty space feels wrong. It feels unproductive. Like you're wasting time. Like you should be doing more. And that pressure never really leaves. Even when you sit down, even when you try to rest, your mind doesn't stop. It keeps going. You should be doing something. You're falling behind. You're wasting time. And suddenly, rest doesn't feel like rest. It feels like guilt. Like you're doing something wrong. Just by being still. So you get up again. You check something. You start something. Anything. To remove that feeling. To get back into motion. Because motion feels safe. Familiar. Controlled. You know what to do when you're busy. There's structure. Direction. Purpose. Even if it's artificial. Even if it doesn't really matter. It feels better than sitting still. With nothing to do. Because when you stop, something else appears. Something you've been avoiding. Thoughts. Feelings. Questions. Things you don't fully understand. Things you don't want to face. And this is where it becomes deeper. Because being busy is not just productivity. It's escape. According to Carl Jung, what you avoid does not disappear. It waits. In the background. In silence. And the moment you slow down, it comes forward. So you stay busy. Not just because you have things to do, but because doing keeps you from feeling, keeps you from thinking too deeply, keeps you from noticing what's underneath. Because when you're constantly occupied, you don't have to confront anything. You don't have to ask difficult questions. You don't have to sit with discomfort. You just move from one thing to the next. And that movement becomes your normal, your identity. I'm always busy. I don't have time. I'm just trying to keep up. But underneath that, there is something else. A dependency. On motion. On distraction. On constant stimulation. Because without it, you feel exposed. Uncertain. Restless. And that restlessness is what drives the addiction. Not the work itself, but what it helps you avoid. Because when you are busy, you don't have to face yourself. You don't have to sit in silence. You don't have to notice the gap between where you are and how you feel. You don't have to confront the emptiness, the confusion, the pressure, the disconnection. You just keep moving. And movement becomes your shield, your way of managing something internal, something unresolved. And over time, you stop seeing it as a choice. It becomes automatic. You fill every moment, every gap, every pause, without even realizing it. Because stillness now feels uncomfortable, unnatural, almost threatening. And that's when you know it's no longer just being busy. It's something deeper, a pattern, a dependency, an addiction to never being still, to never being alone with your own mind, to never having to face what's waiting in the silence. At first, being busy feels productive. It feels responsible. It feels like you're doing something right. You're moving, achieving, keeping up. And in a world that rewards output, that feels good. It gives you validation, a sense of worth, a sense that you matter, because you're doing something. But slowly, that feeling changes. It becomes less about what you're doing and more about how you feel when you stop. Because when you stop, something shifts. The noise fades. The movement pauses. And suddenly, you are left with yourself. No distractions, no tasks, no external focus. Just you. And for many people, that is uncomfortable. Not because something is wrong, but because it's unfamiliar. Because you're not used to being there. You're used to doing, not being. And this is where the addiction begins to reveal itself. Because it's not about work, it's about avoidance. Avoidance of what appears when nothing is happening. According to Carl Jung, the parts of yourself you ignore do not disappear. They remain in the unconscious, waiting. And when there is silence, they rise. Thoughts you've pushed away, questions you haven't answered, feelings you haven't processed. They don't come all at once. They come subtly, quietly, but they are there. And instead of sitting with them, you move again. You reach for something, your phone, your work, a task, anything, to break the silence, to shift your attention outward. Because outward is easier. Outward is controllable. Outward doesn't ask difficult questions, but inward does. Inward asks, why do you feel this way? Why are you restless? Why can't you sit still? And those questions don't always have immediate answers. They require time, reflection, honesty, and that can feel overwhelming. So you avoid them, not consciously, but automatically, by staying busy, by filling every moment, by never giving yourself the space for those questions to fully form. And over time, you lose something important, your ability to be still, to sit with yourself, to exist without distraction. Because now, stillness feels like a problem, something to fix, something to escape. And this is where the pattern deepens. Because the more you avoid stillness, the more uncomfortable it becomes. And the more uncomfortable it becomes, the more you avoid it. And that loop reinforces itself again and again until being busy is no longer a choice. It becomes a need, a constant need, to be doing something, anything, just to avoid that internal space. And this is where identity gets involved. Because you start to define yourself this way. I'm always busy. I can't sit still. I hate doing nothing. And it sounds normal, even admirable. But underneath that, there is dependency. Because if you remove the activity, if you remove the constant movement, you feel lost, disconnected, uncertain. And that feeling is what you've been avoiding all along. Because busyness gives structure. It gives direction. It tells you what to do, what to focus on, what matters. But without it, you are left without that external guidance. You have to turn inward. And when you turn inward, you face things that are not organized, not structured, not clear. Your thoughts, your emotions, your internal conflicts. And this is what many people are not prepared for. Because no one teaches you how to navigate that space, how to understand it, how to sit with it. So instead, you stay in motion. Because motion feels easier, more familiar, more manageable, even if it's exhausting, even if it drains you, even if it leaves you feeling empty at the end of the day. Because at least when you're busy, you don't have to face that emptiness directly. You can postpone it, delay it, ignore it, but it doesn't go away. It waits for the moment you stop. And that moment becomes something you avoid. At all costs, you fill your schedule. You overcommit. You say yes to things you don't even want to do, just to stay occupied, just to avoid that space, that silence, that stillness. Because stillness now feels like exposure, like something might come up, something you don't want to deal with. And this is how the addiction maintains itself, not through pleasure, but through avoidance. You're not addicted to being busy because you love it. You're addicted to it because of what it protects you from, because it keeps you from facing what's underneath. And once you begin to see that clearly, everything shifts. Because now, being busy is no longer just a habit. It becomes a signal that something inside you is asking for attention, not distraction, not avoidance, but attention. And that is where the deeper work begins. Not in doing more, but in doing less. Not in filling your time, but in creating space. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it feels unfamiliar. Because in that space, you begin to reconnect with the parts of yourself you've been moving away from for a long time. And that is where real change starts. You begin to notice something subtle, but undeniable. The moment you slow down, your mind speeds up. Thoughts appear instantly, uninvited, unfiltered, uncomfortable. It's not quiet. It's loud, restless, almost chaotic. And that surprises you, because you assumed that slowing down would bring peace. But instead, it brings everything you've been avoiding. And this is where the pattern becomes clear. Busyness was never creating calm. It was covering the noise, suppressing it, keeping it beneath the surface. And now, without constant movement, there is nothing holding it down. So it rises, not because something is wrong, but because it has always been there, waiting. According to Carl Jung, the unconscious does not disappear. It expresses itself in thoughts, in emotions, in tension, in restlessness. And when you remove distraction, you begin to feel that expression directly. And it feels overwhelming at first, because you are not used to it. You are used to managing your internal state through external activity, through doing, through staying occupied. But now, you are face to face with your inner world, without filters, without buffers, without escape. And the first reaction is resistance, a strong urge to get up, to check something, to move, to do anything, except stay, because staying feels like pressure, like something is building. And in a way, it is, because everything you've been avoiding is now present, in real time. Thoughts about your life, questions you've postponed, feelings you've pushed aside. They don't come as clear answers. They come as fragments, pieces, sensations, a sense that something is unresolved, something is incomplete, and that uncertainty is uncomfortable because the mind prefers clarity, structure, resolution. But this is not structured. It's raw, unfiltered, unorganized, and that makes it difficult to sit with. So the instinct is to escape it, to return to what feels familiar: busyness, activity, movement. Because movement gives the illusion of control. It gives you something to focus on, something to hold on to. But when you begin to stay, even for a little longer than usual, something shifts. Not immediately, but gradually. The intensity changes. The thoughts slow down slightly. The chaos begins to organize itself. And you start to notice patterns. Certain thoughts repeat. Certain feelings return. Certain themes appear again and again. And that's important, because those patterns are not random. They are signals. They are pointing to something. Something your mind has been trying to process. Something that hasn't been fully understood. And this is where awareness deepens. Because now, you are not just experiencing the noise. You are observing it. You are beginning to see its structure, its direction, its meaning. And that creates distance. A small but powerful distance between you and what you are experiencing. You realize you are not the thoughts. You are the one noticing them. You are not the restlessness. You are the one aware of it. And that shift changes your relationship with it. Because now, you are not overwhelmed by it. You are observing it, curious about it, trying to understand it, instead of escape it. And that curiosity opens something. You begin to ask different questions. Not, how do I get rid of this? But, what is this trying to show me? What is behind this restlessness? What is behind this constant need to move? What am I avoiding? And those questions don't always bring immediate answers, but they bring direction. They shift your focus inward, toward understanding, instead of avoidance. And as you continue to stay with it, you begin to notice something deeper. The restlessness is not just random energy. It is connected to something emotional, something unresolved. It might be pressure, a constant sense of needing to do more, to be more, to prove something, even if you don't know exactly what. It might be fear, fear of falling behind, fear of not being enough, fear of being seen as unproductive. It might be emptiness, a lack of meaning, a sense that what you are doing does not fully connect with who you are. And instead of facing that directly, you stay busy, because busyness allows you to avoid that confrontation. It keeps you moving, so you don't have to stop and ask those questions. But when you do stop, those questions become unavoidable. They surface naturally, because they have been waiting. And this is where many people turn back, because this part is uncomfortable. It requires honesty. It requires facing things that are unclear, unresolved, sometimes even painful. But if you stay, if you continue to sit with it, without rushing to escape, something important begins to happen. The discomfort transforms. It doesn't disappear, but it changes. It becomes more specific, more understandable, less overwhelming, because now you are not running from it. You are engaging with it. And engagement brings clarity. You begin to understand your own patterns, why you feel the need to stay busy, what you are trying to avoid, what you are trying to prove, what you are trying not to feel. And that understanding is what weakens the pattern. Because once you see it clearly, it is no longer unconscious. It is no longer automatic. It becomes something you recognize, something you can pause before acting on. And that pause is where change begins, not through force, not through discipline alone, but through awareness. You feel the urge to stay busy, to fill the space, to avoid the silence. But instead of reacting immediately, you notice it. You stay with it, even if just for a moment longer. And that moment creates a break in the pattern, a disruption, because the automatic response is no longer immediate. There is space now between the feeling and the action, and in that space, there is choice. You can still choose to stay busy, but now it is conscious, not automatic. And that difference matters, because repeated awareness leads to change, gradually, naturally, without forcing it, because you are no longer driven by something you don't understand. You are responding to something you are aware of. And this is what Carl Jung meant by bringing the unconscious into consciousness, making visible what was hidden, understanding what was automatic. And when that happens, the pattern loses its control, not instantly, but progressively, because every time you notice, every time you pause, every time you choose differently, you weaken the cycle and strengthen something else, your ability to be with yourself, without needing constant distraction, without needing constant movement, without needing to escape. And that ability changes everything, because now, stillness is no longer threatening. It becomes a space, a place where you can observe, reflect, understand, and connect with yourself. And the more you practice that, the more natural it becomes, the less you depend on busyness to regulate how you feel, because you are learning a different way, a deeper way, to manage your internal state, through awareness, through presence, through understanding. And that is what breaks the addiction, not by removing activity, but by removing the need for constant escape. Through it, the real shift begins, when you stop trying to fill every moment and start allowing space, not because it feels good at first, but because you understand why it matters. Because without space, you cannot see yourself clearly. You cannot hear what is actually going on inside you. You cannot understand what is driving you. So you begin to do something different. You don't eliminate activity. You don't force yourself into silence for hours. You simply create small moments. Moments where you don't reach for anything. Moments where you don't immediately react. Moments where you just sit and notice. At first, those moments feel uncomfortable. Your mind looks for something, anything, a distraction, a task, a reason to move. But you don't follow it immediately. You stay, even if just for a few seconds longer than usual. And in those few seconds, you begin to feel it. That subtle restlessness, that urge to escape, that need to do something. And instead of acting on it, you observe it. You let it exist, without trying to fix it, without trying to remove it. And that changes your relationship with it. Because now, it is no longer something that controls you. It is something you can see, something you can understand. And the more you do this, the more familiar it becomes. The restlessness doesn't disappear overnight, but it becomes less overwhelming, less urgent, because you are no longer resisting it. You are allowing it. And when something is allowed, it loses its intensity, gradually, naturally, without force. And this is where something deeper begins to form. A different kind of stability, not the stability of constant movement, but the stability of presence, the ability to remain with yourself, even when nothing is happening, even when there is no distraction, no stimulation, no task to focus on. And that is a skill, one that most people never develop, because they are always moving, always filling space, always avoiding stillness. But when you begin to build it, everything starts to change. You become less reactive, less dependent on external structure, less driven by the need to stay busy, because you are no longer trying to escape your internal state. You are learning how to be with it, and that creates a different kind of freedom. Not freedom from doing, but freedom from needing to do all the time, just to feel okay. And this is where clarity begins to emerge. Because when your mind is not constantly occupied, you begin to see things differently. Your thoughts become clearer, more organized, less chaotic, because they are no longer being suppressed. They are being processed. You begin to notice what actually matters to you, what feels meaningful, what feels empty, what you've been doing out of habit, and what you've been doing out of avoidance. And that awareness leads to better choices, not forced, not pressured, but natural, because you are no longer acting blindly. You are acting consciously. And this changes your relationship with productivity itself. You no longer use it as an escape. You use it as a tool, something you choose, not something you depend on. Because now, you can work without losing yourself in it. You can be productive without needing it to define your worth. You can rest without feeling guilty, because you understand that your value is not based on constant output. And that realization removes a lot of pressure. The pressure to always be doing more, to always be achieving, to always be moving. Because you see that pressure for what it is, a pattern, not a truth. And once you see that, you stop obeying it automatically. You begin to question it, to step back from it, to create your own rhythm, one that includes movement, but also stillness, one that includes action, but also reflection. And that balance is what was missing, because the problem was never activity. It was imbalance. Too much doing, not enough being. Too much external focus, not enough internal awareness. And when that balance is restored, the need for constant busyness fades, not because you force it to, but because you no longer need it. To avoid yourself, to escape your thoughts, to manage your emotions. You are doing that internally now, through awareness, through presence, through understanding. And this is what Carl Jung pointed toward, not a life without activity, but a life where you are not controlled by unconscious patterns, where you are aware of what drives you, where you can choose instead of react. And that is the difference between being busy and being conscious. One is driven by avoidance, the other is guided by awareness. And once you experience that difference, you cannot go back to the same unconscious pattern. Not fully, because now you see it. You recognize when you are filling space, just to avoid something. You recognize when you are moving, just to escape stillness. And in those moments, you have a choice to continue the pattern or to pause, even briefly, even imperfectly. And that pause becomes your power, because in that pause, you are no longer being driven. You are deciding. And that decision, repeated over time, changes everything. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily, until the need to stay busy all the time is replaced by the ability to be present with yourself, without needing to run, without needing to fill every second, without needing to escape. And that is what freedom actually looks like. Not doing nothing, but no longer needing to do everything, just to avoid being alone with your own mind. If you feel uncomfortable doing nothing, that's not boredom. That's something trying to surface. And according to Carl Jung, what you avoid doesn't disappear. It waits. So here's the question most people never ask. Why do you need to stay busy all the time? What are you trying not to feel when everything goes quiet? Because until you face that, you will keep filling your life with noise, different tasks, same escape. So next time you reach for your phone or try to fill that empty moment, pause just for a few seconds. Don't run. Don't distract yourself. Just notice what comes up. Because that moment, that small moment of stillness, is where you start taking your power back. If you're ready to stop running from yourself and start understanding your mind on a deeper level, subscribe. Because this isn't about doing more. It's about finally being able to sit with who you are